So I feel fortunate that I feel like that's just like part of my makeup is that since I was a little kid, I've never really taken no for an answer, and I'm always going to push and push and push until I make it happen.
Let's have J-Rod kick it off.
Fuck. All right, guys. So welcome to this edition of Jared and Blake's podcast. The name has yet to be determined.
We don't got no name.
We ain't got no name. Maybe that is the name, the No Name Podcast.
Yeah, the podcast with no name.
We're still considering Straight Milk.
Straight milk.
Straight Milk, dog. But
that was Mallory's suggestion.
But yeah, so this is the official episode 2 of Jared and Blake's, or Blake's and Jared's podcast. And today we're going to be talking about, just so you guys can kind of get to know our backgrounds a little bit better. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but we'll be getting into our childhoods, our upbringing. So as we progress in this podcast, you guys can have a little bit more context in terms of who we are, where we came from, where we're at, and where we're going.
Yes, sir. So I guess the purpose of this podcast, right, is us just trying to find our most authentic self and help people find their authenticity as well. Like, who am I really? You know, why am I the way I currently am? And how can I be the person I want to be moving forward, right? What's the most authentic version of myself? Yeah, I think it'll be just real interesting just talking about that.
Yeah.
I think so. But
And I know we had discussed, I think, a little bit on the last podcast about, what was that?
Oh, yeah. A human design.
Yeah, human design. Yeah, so I actually had my coaching call yesterday with the guy that put that personality test together.
Nice.
And it was really interesting. It was kind of pretty much confirming on all levels. It just was him providing
confirming your personality.
Yeah, and it was just providing the context behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a lot of additional context in terms of what I've been through, especially. I didn't get too much into my childhood, but we spoke a lot about what I went through with the disease that I had.
Yeah.
And that provided a lot of context in terms of, because I scored extremely high on a lot of things, like and what he said was above genius level on my vision, my structure, and my people skills.
Oh, nice.
And he's like, there's probably only maybe 1% of the population that has that kind of trifecta.
We should see what your human design is today.
Yeah. So, and I think that, and I told him, I think maybe why I scored high on the vision and the structure is that I grew up being very artistic. So I wrote a lot, I drew a lot.
Autistic or artistic with an R?
Both. So yeah, I grew up really being like more of an artistic type of person. I would kind of tune out during class and sit there and just draw and doodle, or, write my raps or whatever for a long time. And it was only when the responsibility of adulthood and being a father and a provider and all of this, I really had to kind of change guard in terms of like how I approached life, because I didn't necessarily have the time to sit there and and I think part of the reason why I was really good at art is because just I have a hyper focus. I get super focused in, I can tune everything out and just focus on what I'm doing. And, in terms of like drawing portraits, I was like 11 years old, could draw like really good portraits of people.
Right.
And I don't necessarily, I think like being artistic had something to do with it, but I think it's my attention to detail that really made me a good artist, because, instead of the eyes being all wonky looking, like I would pay a lot of attention to detail, especially like copying stuff. Like if you give me a picture, I can sit there and pretty much draw it, almost perfectly with no training.
Nice.
So, but in changing into like responsibility mode, you know, those things didn't serve me so well. So what I kind of had to do, excuse me, what I had to do to, you know, kind of adapt in the world that I was in and the responsibilities that I had to start focusing on getting analytical and getting like process driven and, you know, results driven. Right. So I started kind of, I guess, rewiring my brain to be that way.
Yeah.
And then I think what it did though, this natural inclination for me to be artistic and have like vision and, you know, put it on paper and all of this, and then turn that into being process driven and results driven and analytical, rewired my brain that way. And then it's just like I guess a unique combination of the two to have the vision, but also the process behind it.
What's the personality test called that you took?
Habit Finder.
Habit Finder.
Okay. Yeah. And what provided a lot of context for him is that, and this is something I'm not proud of, but definitely something to work on, is my joy levels were definitely not in the high range. But in going through, you know, what I've gone through with health, and it's only been, you know, a matter of 4 months since I had my surgery to correct all that. And it's kind of like I'm refiguring out life. Because
and this is what I wanted to get into depth with on you. So if we can pause there, because I have a series of questions I want to ask you. So if we back it up and go into your early life, but before we do that, we should probably light these up.
Good idea.
You know, it's tradition.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, how would you know? It's only episode 2. But we try to smoke a cigar. I think now that we have this set up in the garage, we're going to be smoking a lot more, which is great. So we're big cigar fans, and today what we're smoking is a Fonseca by My Father. My Father is they're a really old brand. They've been around for a while. This is like,
so your dad didn't make this?
Yeah, not My Father.
Okay,
I should say it correctly. My father.
Mi padre.
Because there's My Father, and then there's My Father.
Mi papa.
Mi padre. Yeah. Remember you were wearing your Padres shirt last time?
Yeah. The dads.
The Padres. The dads. But yeah, these are awesome. And I don't know all the details about them, but we're going to teach a little bit about cigars right now. So obviously you have the foot of this cigar, which is where you light. And then you have the head of cigar with a cap. That's where you cut. And so J-Rod, if you could, go ahead. This is a V cut. Any type of, I can't remember what this shape is called. I got to be a little bit more knowledgeable about this stuff. But basically, if it's a flat top like that, we have a V cutter. So it's going to put a little channel in there. You can V cut once, turn a 90-degree angle, and then V cut again to get a nice little crown cut or a rose cut. So, other way. There we go. That one's a tricky one. Beaut. Yeah, and then you can just turn that cut 90 degrees, and it makes like a little crown, little X. Probably the best airflow.
Like so.
Yeah, like so. That's beauty. So I'll do this here on my lap. But yeah, dude. So you're pretty new to cigars. I've been smoking cigars since like last November, so almost a year.
Yeah, you got me into cigars. You're like, you want a cigar? Yeah. I'm like, sure.
So what about cigars? You've had some before, right? Like at a wedding or something, right? But
yeah. Weddings, birth of my sons,
right?
Birth of other people's sons,
birthing.
So
what do you like about cigars? Why do you smoke them?
You know, I think it's kind of relaxing, and it's something to do with your buddy. You know, I don't know that I'm so interested in smoking cigars by myself. Maybe I'll turn into Arnold and I'm walking around with a cigar constantly. But yeah, I think it's more of just like almost like a fellowship. You know, it's something that we can do together, that we both enjoy together. And, you know, they don't smell great, but I feel like it's relaxing. And
I think they smell good while you smoke it.
Yeah.
But afterwards, if you don't like get in the shower right away.
Yeah. And I think there's just something intrinsic with smoke. You know, just seeing smoke.
It's primitive.
Yeah, it's primitive in the way that it kind of settles in the air. And, you know, there's just something to that. I remember, because I grew up, not so much anymore, but I grew up, you know, kind of being a little pothead kid. And I just remember, like, say the sun's going through the blinds, and then you have some smoke sitting there, and then it's just kind of like, you see it like waving around and stuff. Sure. And it's really like relaxing and calming.
It's like really good graphics.
Yeah.
You know, I always like to say that the simulation theory, you know, like what we're doing, and is this even real? We don't even know.
Hey, mathematically speaking, it's more probable than not that we are in a simulation.
Right.
So and I also, we could get into this later, but I feel like aliens are us in the future visiting ourselves.
I've heard that theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole, I've heard that theory, and I kind of do subscribe to it. So what Jared's doing, he's lighting up here, but if you can put the camera over here, Mal, when you light a cigar, it's not like lighting a cigarette, right? So you got to really, these are premium cigars, by the way. These are above the $20 range. Fantastic cigars. It's all pure tobacco, handmade, hand rolled. I got my own right here, but hand rolled stuff, really good. But basically, this tobacco doesn't burn like a cigarette. All the carcinogens and all the chemicals and everything that they put in a cigarette, it's just gonna burn through. Like once you light a cigarette, it's done. It'll burn through and then it's done. But a cigar, premium tobacco, will only stay lit if you nurture if you keep puffing on it. So basically, when you light a cigar, you want to come here. This is a torch. This is a hard flame is what they call it. So I'm just barely toasting the edge of this. I'm just kind of spinning it, just warming up that tobacco. You can kind of see where it's those embers are forming. And I like to get the edge a little bit even before I go. Kind of take a look at it, waft it around. But I'm a couple inches away from that flame, and I'm just getting that foot nice and toasted. And then I'll make sure it's all even. It's almost ready for an inhale. Right about there. Now I'll light it. Nice. And you can see there was like some flame that jumped up there when I puffed on it. Ooh, that's nice. But yeah, that's how you light a cigar. And it just warms that tobacco up. That first puff is one of my favorites. And then
I think I've seen where people only light them with a match because something about just not having the butane or whatever.
Yeah, some people claim they've smoked enough that they can kind of taste the lighter fluid or the butane. So if you're using a soft flame, it's just really hard to
have a controlled lighting process.
And this lighter's like wigging out on me. This is a travel lighter. But yeah, the butane or the lighter fluid could like interfere with your taste, is what some people say. So they're kind of like match purists, and they just want to do a match. It's a long burning match. If you've ever seen those long matches, that's what those are for cigars. But it takes a minute to properly light a cigar the correct way.
If you guys notice, I didn't light mine like Blake.
Yeah.
I'm still very much a novice.
No, there's getting it lit is getting it lit, right? But there's just like it's kind of become a ritual for me. You're saying you might not do cigars by yourself. I do cigars alone or with Mal in the backyard. I'm the only one smoking though, but it's the ritual for me, right? It's the preparation of the cigar because I have to keep it in a humidor, keep it at a certain humidity, and I'm checking that thing probably once or twice a week if I remember to. Once a week for sure. So I have some cigars in there that I've had since November, and I'm going to keep them long term. I got some Cubans that I'm only going to smoke on our anniversary. So once a year, I got like 5 or 6 of those. So you can keep a cigar for a long time, but it takes about 8. I think the average is like 6 to 8 years it takes for this tobacco, from growing the tobacco, for it to be in your hand. Yeah, it's about 500 steps that someone does by hand. Like from growing, harvesting, And then,
Processing and
they process the leaf and then they hang it up to dry and ferment. And then they put it in a basement. Sometimes they dunk them in coffee or like liquors to get a certain blend. And then each, like the top, middle, and the bottom part of the tobacco plant all have like a different flavor. So you could have the same strand of tobacco, but only have top leaf or like bottom leaf and have a completely different blend. And so it's
that's
crazy.
most interesting.
It is most interesting.
So what makes a Cuban cigar so special?
So Cubans, that's where cigars come from. Obviously, it's a Cuban thing. So Cuban cigars are like the original, right? They're the OG. But then in the 60s, with the Cold War going on, and Kennedy actually put an embargo or like banned all Cuban cigars.
Yeah, but he
bought a
made
bunch
sure
first.
to buy a bunch.
Yeah.
To buy a bunch first. Yeah,
They bought like 1,000, I think. But so the Cuban cigars like kind of got this big embargo. So a lot of cigar families actually fled Cuba during the Cold War and all that stuff, and they moved to like Nicaragua, other places in the Gulf and Central and South America, and so
thus spreading the culture.
Spreading the culture of cigars. And I'm sure like other countries made cigars as well. Like once the Cubans did it, other people did it. But what happened was you had a lot of Cuban families that pushed out and kept their cigar manufacturing alive and like just moved to Nicaragua. So you have like Cuban cigars, which are more rare and supposedly better. I've smoked some Cubans and I've smoked some New World cigars. Anything that's not a Cuban cigar is called a New World cigar. And they're almost better now. Some people argue that the New Worlds are better because they're more uniform. They've gotten just better at the process of it than the Cubans. But it's debatable. There's like the purists. They're like, oh no, you gotta stay Cuban or what, just like with anything, any
Cuban
hobby.
or bust.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that tutorial there, Blake.
But anyway, we're going to be starting a cigar club here in St. George, all over the state of Utah. It's kind of hard to get tobacco compared to other states. It's easier you can still go get it, but you just can't like have it shipped to your house and other convenient methods that are not available to Utah people. So we're going to see what
Gotta
we can
love
do.
Utah.
Gotta love it. Yeah.
It's God's country.
Apparently. But this is a pretty mellow cigar. If you're getting like the darker the tobacco is, usually the more strong the tobacco is. So you don't want like super thick clouds like a lot of people that vape, or if you've smoked weed or like whatever. Yeah, that thick cloud is, and these cigars are great for that. But if you have a darker cigar and you're doing like thick vapor clouds like in your face, like it'll burn your eyes. And so like this is like a thick cloud right here. Right, that's pretty thick smoke. But if I had a darker one, I would just do a nice steady draw. And maybe blow about that much out. Because you just want to get the taste. You don't inhale these at all. You just smoke them.
Yep.
Puff them in and out.
And that's some people's something they don't like about cigars is because they're so used to the inhalation, and that's kind of what they get their kick on.
Yeah, Andreas couldn't breathe this. He couldn't smoke a cigar until he like inhaled it.
Really?
Yeah, he's like he didn't know how to just puff.
Yeah. And I think it was I talked to Matt after he came and visited you, and he's like, "Yeah, offered me a cigar or whatever, but I just like the inhale, so I'm not too into it."
Oh, he just likes the inhale, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people like that in their lungs. I know people that they'll inhale a cigar like one puff or something like that. Some old timers, but
yeah, I was telling you about my uncle, my crazy uncle, but yeah, he smoked cigars and he inhaled that shit.
That's crazy.
He also had COPD.
Mesothelioma.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Doug, and I have mesothelioma. That's crazy.
Asbestos.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so, and my dad has COPD as well, but those guys, I mean, they were career drywallers, and back in the days of asbestos, all while smoking, and it did not set them up for success. And I think my dad was just at the doctor like 2 days ago. And every once in a while, man, he gets pretty bad. He has to go be hospitalized for a few days, and
Shit.
Yeah, he's got some breathing problems.
Just from asbestos.
Well, I
Or
mean,
from all
he
that?
smoked for probably 50 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he doesn't smoke anymore. But yeah, he smoked for a long, long time. And, now he's, I mean, rule number one, you got to be able to breathe to survive, so he's,
What's that song, Mal? Like from Modest Mouse? I need oxygen to breathe. You need oxygen to breathe.
Correct.
Yeah. Dude, that's crazy. 50 years of smoking, though. Like, how many packs a day would he smoke?
he wasn't like a chain smoker. He just enjoys to smoke.
Yeah,
And
like
so-
while he was doing something. Or...
Yeah, just, stressed out, have a cigarette. Eat a meal, have a cigarette. I think it's just kind of the habit of like, you do this, then that, like the association of them together.
Yeah.
And it was interesting though, because he was able, whenever he wanted to quit, he could quit for 2-3 years at a time. And he wouldn't have like crazy withdrawals or anything like this. It was more, he just liked to do it. But if he wanted to quit, then he would just quit and maybe have a couple days where he's like, oh man, I need smoke. But then other than that, he was,
Yeah.
yeah. And I feel lucky too, because like, I don't know, I've never had like a super addictive personality. And, even like, say I smoked cigarettes as a young teen and, was able just to like, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And, or even, times when, because I think marijuana is more addictive than people portray it to be.
I agree.
And, but yeah, even like, times when I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be smoking anymore. And it's just like, okay, well, I'm just not smoking anymore.
Do you think people get like addicted to the substance, or like obviously there's like chemical reaction in the dopamine in your head, but I think people get addicted to like the state of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more so that now there's, variables to like your chemistry and how that stuff affects you and, how addicted you can become. But yeah, I think it's the state of mind. And for me, it actually, just like anything, it's something that can benefit you, but also a negative. So
Yeah.
the things that it benefited me with is like, hyper stressed. Okay, now I'm chilled out. But also like if, say I have a ton of things going on and it's like, okay, I got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to do that. And it's like kind of like almost anxiety starts to take hold,
Like overwhelmed.
yeah, smoke a little weed and then it's just like everything comes into like clear view in terms of the priority for stuff. And it's just like, okay, start doing it. Boom, 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 boom. So it was actually something that allowed me to be able to get a lot of like tedious type of work done. Yeah, like for tedium, it's great. But in terms of enthusiasm and other aspects of work, it's not so great.
Like knocking doors.
Like knocking doors, I would not recommend that. Absolutely not.
Yeah, don't do door-to-door sales while you're high,
Yeah.
especially if you want to keep your job.
Yeah. Well, and and it's a thing of like, there's a lot to go into it. And there's this kind of negative undertone when people think of door to door, but it's like, the people that are the best of the best with that, trust that they're doing tons of personal development habits, and you've heard me say it quite a bit, but my paycheck has always been a direct reflection of the amount of personal development that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And because it's like, you're going to knock on someone's door and there's tactics that you use that allow you to advance in your script. Because the further you get in your script, the closer you get to setting an appointment or whatever it is. And whether it's, smoke screens, whether it's, disarming them with, a funny joke or just whatever it is.
You got to be sharp.
Yeah, there's all these little tactics that allow you to advance. Well, probably one of the best tactics is to personally develop yourself. So when you show up, you just have this kind of glow about you. And for some reason, when they see someone that just has a certain positive energy to them, because that person is like, the best version of themselves or someone that's like truly working on themselves, there's just something that catches people's eye and they just want to listen. There's just
like a little sparkle in your eye. Right?
Little sparkle in your eye. And it's extremely important to generate curiosity. That's like the whole thing of door to door is being able to generate curiosity. and just you as an individual, a positive outlook, like a twinkle in your eye, like your disposition, if that's all positive and people are attracted to that, it generates a little curiosity, like, what's this guy about?
Yeah.
You know, and
like, why is this guy different?
Yeah, you know, because if I show up and, you know, had a hard night of drinking and, you know, my tone's down, my body language is down, like my eyes are glazed over, they're just, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? Like, hey, you know, didn't you see the no soliciting sign? Slam the door in your face or whatever.
Yeah.
But if it's like, you know, someone that's pleasant to talk to, and typically people that, again, are personally developing themselves, they're usually tend to be a little bit more pleasant to talk to. It generates a little bit of curiosity. Okay, well, what's this guy about? You know?
Yeah, it's true. It's you can tell when people are really putting the effort into life, and like they're really enthusiastic and genuine about what they do. Mm-hmm. You can tell every time. I mean, and the more you talk to them too, the longer a window. If it's a 10-minute window that you're talking to them, you could tell by minute 2. You know, you're like, yeah, this guy's a joke, or this guy's for real.
Yep.
You know, it's really interesting.
And I'm sure that you've seen this in situations where you're closing. People are like, you know, I've never responded to door-to-door sales. I've never had anyone come into my house and show me a presentation, but there was just something about the guy at the door.
Yeah, something about that kid.
Yeah,
exactly, man. That's how you can tell you got a winner of a coordinator or a setter.
Mm-hmm.
That's every time.
Yep.
But now that we're lit up, man, I think we want to get your information into what we call, I think it's called a human design, right? Yeah, a human design, and then we'll kind of reveal it as we go.
And I actually have a first cousin on my mom's side. He's he's since passed away, unfortunately, but about 6-7 years older than me, maybe 8 years, and we have the same birthday.
Oh, cool.
And then my sisters have obviously the same birthday.
Same year too?
No, he's about 8 years older than me. And then my sisters have the same birthday because they're twins, but they were premature, but their due date was also on my birthday. So out of 5 grandkids, my grandparents had 3 birthdays to remember, and potentially only 2, but they were preemies. That happens a lot with twins.
Okay, so let's talk about your early life. So what's your earliest memory that you have?
Dude, I got like a memory of like crawling like through the hallway. Like, I don't know, I had to have been a baby. And I remember I had like a little crayon and I shoved it up my nose. And I also remember my 3rd birthday because I remember that all the presents were in the bedroom. And I remember going in there and like checking them out and like
scoping it.
Yeah, scoping the scene. And then I also remember when I was 4, because I just remember telling people and holding my little hand out and being like, I'm 4, like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the earliest memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I lived in Southern California till I was 7. So I'd actually started 2nd grade in California and then decided to move with my dad to Utah. And when I moved to Utah, it was still summer vacation. So I had started 2nd grade for about a month, something like that. Went to Utah, still had 2 more weeks of vacation. And then I started 2nd grade again. But as far as like early life, you know, I don't have any memories of my father living with me. He and my mom had split pretty early going on. So, you know, he would just visit sometimes, you know. And yeah, so we ended up living in Apple Valley, California. It's definitely off the beaten path, off the dirt roads and stuff. So we were kind of little desert rat kids, just running around the desert having fun. And, you know, my mom, we always had a place to stay. You know, we always, you know, like we never got put in foster care or anything like that, because I had some cousins and I know some people that had similar upbringings because, you know, bless my parents' heart, but also both of them were, you know, involved with drugs, like, you know, like methamphetamines and stuff. Right. When I was a kid.
Did you end up, you said something that stuck with me a while ago, but like if you were hungry, at like what age were you like cooking for yourself or like finding your own food?
Yeah. So, with that, people can get, both of which are, they don't do drugs like that anymore or anything like that. But, when you're, when you're addicted to drugs, you're not necessarily, taking care of business like you otherwise would. So, when
Unless
I was
it's to get more drugs.
Yeah, this is to get more drugs, but yeah. So I remember by the time I was 6, I was like pushing a chair up to the stove if I wanted some eggs, because I saw my sisters cooking. They were 2 years older than me, and they'd make some eggs or a burrito or whatever it was, and if I wanted one, my only option was to
Make it yourself.
make it myself. So yeah, so I remember pushing a chair up to the stove and figuring it out. And it's funny because even my kids now, like my oldest, he's starting to cook. He's about 12, but it's like, I have to keep a close eye on it just to make sure that things are going well. And I really didn't have that. And for whatever reason, I just figured it out. I feel like I've always been extremely adaptable. And that was just one of the things. If I wanted a good meal, I had to provide it for myself. And by the time I was, around 7 or so, that's when I started, if I wanted laundry, do my own laundry. And we never really had like a dryer, I don't remember. So we'd hang the clothes out to dry and stuff like that. Or I think we, probably went to laundromats and stuff. We moved a lot. I moved, I think 17 times by the time I was 17. So
once a year.
Yeah, so just quite a bit.
Did you always move like schools too, or was it like?
I was lucky enough to not have to move schools a lot. I mean, my dad went to like, I don't know, I think 5 different high schools and ended up just not even graduating. But yeah, so I was lucky enough to not have to go to a ton of schools. It was just more or less moving around town. And when you live in a small town, you don't have to change schools a whole lot.
Yeah, there's only so many options, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so it was definitely interesting. I just had to be really independent growing up. Like if I wanted something, I pretty much had to provide it for myself. And not to say I didn't get things from my parents, but there was definitely a disconnect when people are, have their own personal issues. They may not fulfill other obligations to their potential.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was definitely interesting. And the last place that we lived in California before I moved in with my dad, it was actually a 1-bedroom shack. It was on my mom's friend's property, and it didn't have any running water. So my uncles would bring in water. They'd truck in some water, like 5-gallon, whatever they are. They'd truck those in, just put them back in their truck once a week, and we'd fill up a barrel. And that's how I would take baths.
Nice.
I would take a bath once a week.
Little House on the Prairie style?
Yeah. So on Sundays, so just I was clean for the school week, So it was definitely a culture shock when I moved to Utah, especially because there was like kind of a richer neighborhood across the street from where we lived. And I think I told you before, but it was like the craziest thing I ever saw when I went over to my friend's house and saw how big it was, because I'd never been in a house like that.
Yeah.
How clean and nice, and open up the pantry and it was fully stocked with food. I was like, what's this?
Like not like cook eggs food, like
yeah,
not like gotta make it. It's like open
snacks
the package
and like all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
Twinkies, like you name it.
Yeah, so it was kind of a culture shock for me because you don't know what you don't know, and and I won't sit here and say that I wasn't happy as a child. I was a happy little camper. I remember my mom telling me that. She's like, "You're a happy camper," Yeah. So, but yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And it was just definitely a culture shock to go from, some of the most humble beginnings in America.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people, there are people that have struggled and been through a lot, but, not a lot of people have actually like lived like that,
Like a pioneer, dude.
Like a pioneer, bro.
Right.
So, but a lot of that, it set me up for success, but also it set me up for a lot of issues because having to be that independent so young, I know I can rely on myself.
Yeah.
You
learned a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to let me read some of this to you
Okay.
because this might resonate with you. So there's a couple different types that you can be classified in this human design. There's manifestors, manifestor generators, reflectors, and projectors. And you, my friend, are a projector.
Projector.
It's about 20% of the population,
Nice.
right? Yeah, you might have to relight that.
Yeah.
So projectors are known for their deep wisdom and their ability to guide and direct others. They have the unique ability to see and understand others in a way that can bring clarity and insight. This can make them excellent advisors, coaches, or consultants. Their aura is focused and absorbing, allowing them to penetrate deeply. You hear that? Penetrating deeply.
That's been a major focus for a long time.
Jared's been penetrating deeply into other people's energy for a long time.
Amongst other things.
Yeah. So, like a generator, they're designed to respond, and manifestors are the initiators. Projectors are here to wait for invitations and recognition. This is not about passivity, but it's about aligning themselves with the correct opportunity. Excuse me. It's not about being passive. It's about aligning themselves to the correct opportunities and people who value their insights and guidance. Does that strike a chord with you at all?
It does. It does, because like
I'm seeing it already.
I'm not the one to crash your party. That's for sure. Like if I don't get the invite, and I'm not going to take it personal. It's just like, hey,
Yeah.
if I ain't in the inn, I'm not in the inn. It's all good.
I didn't get the invite. I'm not going to go.
Yep.
But yeah, dude, like right here, excellent advisors, coaches, or consultants. Yeah, dude, that's you. I love that. So yeah, you're not designed to initiate. You're not designed. You're waiting for the invitations and recognition. For people who for the right opportunity and people who value your insight and guidance. So let me read this. As a projector, understanding and accepting this waiting strategy can be challenging, especially in a world that values constant doing and initiating. However, when they honor their design, they can find themselves in the right place with the right people, contributing their wisdom and making a real difference. Projectors are here to learn about and understand the other, but it's also crucial for them to know themselves deeply. Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of generalities here. Their type, strategy, authority, profile, centers, channels, and gates can provide value. Oh, that's all the other stuff. In terms of energy, projectors are not designed for long-term, consistent work. They need plenty of rest and downtime, and they thrive when they can work in short bursts and have ample time to recharge. I don't know if if you were to look back at your life, because I know you're a hard worker, but do you feel like you're short on energy at times?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of it I would say has right now I don't feel super short on energy. Yeah, I'm super tired. I've been tired for 13 years because my oldest just turned 12. So through going through that pregnancy and all of that, and then we had 3 kids in 3 years. So
yeah.
But yeah, and I would agree with my natural inclination is to need rest time and need that stuff. But
and it's vague on the time. Is it every day? Probably not. Is it
well,
occasionally?
I've been able to turn myself into a grinder, to the point where I have to get better at it, but to where I put everything aside except for the grind. And because it's that moves the needle the most in terms of my profession, my finances, but things fall to the wayside for health, relationships. And so it's something that I'm really focused on moving forward is really and that's part of this podcast, I would say, to find my authentic self and understanding myself and what my needs are and addressing those needs, because I've gotten too good at addressing the needs of others and putting myself aside. If
you're not serving your own authenticity, right? If you're not being your true self, it doesn't matter if you're like trying to level up yourself or whatever. Like if you don't even know who you are, you don't even know like what's really authentically you, you can't level up.
Yeah.
You're going to go try stuff. You're going to try things that don't fit. You're going to lose interest in things. You're going to force things. You're going to try and jump in the river, this crazy river of self-help, right? Like everybody's out there talking about it. We're talking about it right now. But you got like the big hitters. You got like the Jocko podcasts. You got all these names, the Goggins, Tony Robbins, all these people, they talk about leveling up in these ways. But if you don't understand yourself, it's really hard to apply any of this stuff. You could probably have some success, but you're like, man, I took this course from, so-and-so, and I spent like 10 grand on this course and like, I just didn't get anything from it. Or like maybe you did, but you try to apply these things. And like, we see it all the time in the door-to-door industry. Some people, until they understand like who they are and what their strengths are, like they can go pound their head against the brick wall and maybe make a lot of money, but then the longevity of it, they fizzle out, right?
Yeah.
So in your earlier days, what would be like the first, you mentioned something about how you used to see patterns or like you kind of got out of your creative because of life. Like what was the earliest time you remember seeing a solution to something and like that others didn't?
Well, that's something that I feel like, and especially over time, because I've been in a lot of situations where, I'm either the coaching someone or leading someone and, and being a leader within a sales organization.
Do you think that comes naturally for you?
I feel like it comes naturally. And what I've noticed is some people, like, I'm trying to teach them lessons about problem solving and being solution based and not looking at the negative aspect of stuff. And as I've looked back at my childhood, I've always had this inclination to be solution oriented and problem solving. Like I've just never felt there was like anything that I couldn't do. Like it didn't matter what it was. There's always a way. There is always a way. There's always a way. I just got to get creative enough to find it, and that's just intrinsic to who I am.
Do you think that came from like you solving problems like hunger? You're like, I'm hungry. I'm going to solve this problem.
I don't know.
How to cook eggs.
It very well could have, but just some of my earliest memories, like, is like me, like out in the yard, like just whatever it is, like I just have this certain determination to, if it's something I'm focused on, to get it done.
Yeah. And,
I used to just dig big ass holes and fill them up with water, big holes, not big assholes, but, I wanted a pond in my front yard and I wanted to jump out of the tree and land in the water.
Yeah.
So,
you made it happen.
I made it happen. Or I used to draw up plans for like a fort. So I had different versions of forts, different forts that I built, but one of which was a hole in the ground with just like a piece of plywood over the top and like a little hatch you can go down in there and hang out. Or I would draw up plans for like, an above ground, like, framed out one. And I'd go to like, that didn't really happen until I got to St. George because there wasn't a lot of building going along or around in California. But St. George, there was all these houses going up all the time.
So you could just go find scrap wood.
So yeah, I'd go find scrap wood and a hammer and nails. And, I'd have like a little saw and I would go out into like...
Bring it back on your bike.
Yeah, well, I'd put it in a wagon, bro. Yeah. Radio flyer, dog. So I would, go build forts, and I was just always very like just naturally would draw up plans for stuff and then execute on those plans. And it didn't matter like what it was. If I wanted to do it, like I was just going to find a way to do it.
Yeah, just making it happen.
And I see that in my, excuse me, I see that in my oldest son a lot too. It's to the point where he actually gets in trouble sometimes, but he's just finding creative solutions to do what he wants to do. And, and I try not to be so negative. Like, it's like, hey, you zigged when you should have zagged. Like that was the wrong thing to do. But I can also appreciate you being,
taking some initiative,
making
a choice.
And, like you wanted what you wanted and you made it happen regardless.
Yeah. Like with his limited knowledge, right? He still found a way to do it.
Yeah, just find a way.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't know how to zig. He's like, I only know how to zag, but I'm going to zag all the way
I'm going to zag all the way till I zag in a full circle and get to where I'm going.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Like Zoolander, he can only turn left, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, so I feel fortunate that I feel like that's just like part of my makeup is that since I was a little kid, I've never really taken no for an answer, and I'm always going to push and push and push until I make it happen.
Right.
You know?
So this young kid, right? So here's some more info about a projector. Projectors, they're here to offer insight, wisdom, and direction to others. They are often able to see things that others miss, understand systems and patterns, and offer guidance that can lead to greater efficiency, clarity, and success.
That's what I'm all about, dog.
Like I feel like, you know, maybe in younger terms, you know, maybe you and I or anybody in a younger age is like, they haven't fully hit their stride into whatever their human design is, right? They're not fully into that. I think it takes time. So if you're thinking about doing this human design, I would say if you're over the age of 25, do it. But if you're not, you don't know who you are yet, don't do it. I would say over the age of 30, do a human design or close to it. But anyway, so you being able to understand systems and patterns, seeing things that other people miss. Let's talk about that, because I've seen you do that real time in our adult life in the workspace. How did that look like as a kid for you? Like, let's maybe like you're starting to get into junior high, playing sports, doing stuff. Like, what kind of instances were there where you were like, man, I could see a better way to do this, and maybe systems, blah, 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 blah.
You know, off the top of my head, it's hard, but like I got into skateboarding when I was like 13, and I taught all the kids in my neighborhood how to kickflip. And
so you found out a system of how to kickflip.
A system how to kickflip.
And then you offered coaching and guidance.
Yep. And it started in the grass.
How many kids did you teach?
Probably like 6.
6 guys.
But yeah, it started in the grass because it's like the most, like it's soft, and you know, because if you do a kickflip and then there's like,
yeah, your skateboard's
wobbling, like it's hard to find the balance to stay on the skateboard and also, you know, achieve the maneuver of, you know, pushing down with your back foot, bringing your top foot up and doing a little slide down and it actually flipping and then landing on it. So
you could get in the grass.
So I developed a system where you'd start out in the grass. Once you got that down, then you go on the concrete, and then you would start off in a crack in the where
the wheels get in the little crack.
Where the wheels get in the little crack, right? And I think that's called an expansion joint. But anyway, so you'd put you would learn how to do it from there on like a hard surface,
right? And
because you wouldn't necessarily land back in the crack, so you had to be able to land like balanced, you know. And then from there, you know, then you take it to just basically as you get out of the crack, and then be able to, you know, maintain your balance and then pull it off, and then do it as you're riding.
Right.
And then that would progress into doing it over stuff like over a skateboard or up onto a curb. So that was the system. And we were all able to, like, you know, eventually be able to kickflip over skateboards and kickflip onto the curb. And they were like, yeah, dude, it's the I forgot what they called it, but yeah, it was basically the kickflip system. The
kickflip system.
Yeah, the kickflip system. It really worked.
So that was like an early implementation where you were like, man, I see a system here.
Yeah.
And you could do that. So I'll keep reading here, but yeah, so recognizing your unique gift right there around systems, offering guidance for people, and like creating efficiency is like what a projector is all about. And so you got your kickflip system. Anything else, like in your personal life, could you remember, like, what was your morning routine like? Were you pretty rigid with a morning routine, or did you like roll out of bed last minute, get to school?
Yeah, it was probably more roll out of bed last minute, get to school. Now, I had a interesting kind of upbringing because I never had a room.
Oh, yeah.
So
talk about that for a little bit.
Well, you know, growing up, like, I'd share a room with my sisters or whatever. But as we started getting older, it just got a little cramped to have, you know.
Yeah, plus, you know, The young ladies need their privacy.
Yeah, young ladies need their privacy, especially when they started getting 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
You know, stuff starts changing. And so, yeah, for a long time, I lived in, it was about 3-4 years. We lived in this place. And so we had like the kitchen and you have like the high bar counter right there. And then the living room was right there. So we had the couch about 5 feet from that counter. And what I did was I had a blanket that I had like kind of tacked up underneath it. And then just went over the couch.
Okay, so you made like a little fort.
I made a fort.
That was your room.
That was my room, was a fort. And so...
From what age do you remember that happening until when?
I was about 9 or 10.
When did you get your first room?
Maybe 8.
Wait, when did you get your first like bedroom?
First bedroom was when... But yeah, so just to kind of like start from there, I had my little, I had like my blankets, pillow in there, and I had like little posters pinned up on the wall. I had like
under the counter.
Yeah, like Spice Girls up there because I thought the Spice Girls were hot, and like stuff like that.
Spice Girl.
I don't know, maybe Baby Spice. I like Baby Spice.
She's the blonde one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, but there was times where every once in a while I'd go live with my dad. I always just drawn back to live with my mom. But yeah, there was a couple points where I'd live with my dad for like 6 months or whatever, and there were at times where I would have a room when I was with him.
Oh yeah.
But for whatever reason, I was just drawn back to my mom, and I think it was because my dad, he's always liked to drink, and I've never liked to be around him when he's drunk. Yeah. And so I would just be drawn back to go live with my mom, especially because, stuff going on. My sister's always having like, our house was kind of like the hangout house. So there'd just always be people over, stuff going on, interactions. But yeah, so I lived in there for a long time. And then we had another place where we lived there for about 4 years, and I slept on the couch. But I had all my stuff in the garage. And that's like, I had like my clothes and all of that in the garage, and we kind of had that set up. Like we had carpet and...
so the garage was like your closet.
Yeah, the garage was like my closet, but, dresser in there, carpet, and we did have mattresses in there. I would never sleep in there, but sometimes my buddies would. And yeah, and that was kind of like the hangout spot for me and my buddies in the garage, but I slept on the couch.
Yeah, it's come full circle now. We're in a garage.
Yeah.
Smoking cigars, podcasting.
Yep. But yeah, then... I had moved in with my dad again when I was like 17. We had this whole ordeal where basically our house got raided, and it was the very last day we were living there.
Raided by
the police.
The police. Okay. So,
yeah.
Because usually if a robber's, say
raiders, yeah. It was raided by the police. It was it was that house that I slept on the couch, but so basically. I was removed from like custody of my mom and had to go live with my dad. And I was like already 17,
Yeah, so like one more year.
Yeah, so I went and stayed with him, and it was a pretty ghetto place. It was super old. It's actually not even there anymore. Like they tore it down and built.
They dozed it?
Yeah, they dozed it. But I remember it was just infested with daddy long legs.
This was in St. George? Then?
Yeah.
What part of St. George?
Downtown over by Main Street.
Okay, so not quite Dogtown.
Yeah.
Is that where your mom lived? Was D-Town?
No, we always lived in Dixie Downs. The Dirty D. If you ever heard of me. Yeah, I used to have raps about Dixie Downs. But, and that's where I met Jeff Ilstead, was over in Dixie Downs, because he lived out there too. But yeah, so I lived with my dad over there, and I had a room, but I mean, it was infested with... the
daddy long legs.
With daddy long legs. And I used to like wake up at night with them crawling on me, just like smack it, throw it, go back to bed. But that was a pretty, and I remember there was this guy, and I think he was just having like a bad trip or whatever, but he was screaming for like maybe 2 days straight, like blood curdling screams. And I told my dad, I'm like, I'm going to call the cops. And he's like, no, don't call the cops. Like,
no.
Yeah, we didn't call the cops back then. But yeah, so just pretty interesting in terms of like growing up. And it was like, for me to have like my first like real bed, I was 19 years old and I had bought it.
Yeah, because you got we'll get into that next episode too, about your, I'm going to say like adult life. Right. We'll get into that. So we're talking about, for those of you who don't know, we're going over Jared's younger life this episode. Then we'll do mine back and forth. And again, the reason for all this, it's kind of our journey. We're mapping out how we found like our true selves up until this point.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of hard to do. It's a moving target, I think, because we're always evolving and changing.
Mhm.
But okay, so also I wanted to ask, in your what part of what role did religion play in your early years at all, if any?
None. We went to church a couple times with my grandparents. They were like, went to church every Sunday. They were went to a Lutheran church.
Right.
And so if we were to ever visit my grandparents, then we would go to church. But I mean, I probably went 5 times my whole childhood. I've probably been to a Mormon church more than I've been to.
How many times have you been to a Mormon church?
Probably 6 times.
Right. Did you ever, growing up in St. George, right? And like, I'm assuming a lot of your friends were Mormon or LDS. Yeah. Did that ever appeal to you to like do the religion like they were? Did you almost like go sign up, get baptized, get dunked?
I attempted to read the Book of Mormon one time, but I was already like an adult. I think I was like 22 or 23.
So nothing in your like early years then?
No, I was never drawn to it. And I don't think I was ever like invited to be into it.
When did you go? Like you said, you went about 5, 6 times.
Yeah, it wasn't until my previous marriage.
So out of your, like nothing in high school. You never went to a Mormon church in high school?
No, not one time.
So it was more adult life stuff.
Yeah, early adult life stuff. My previous marriage, she was LDS for a bit, and we had this interesting roommate. His name's Brian Mackert. So he's a published author. You can look him up. You find all sorts of stuff on him. But he super interesting story. He came from FLDS background, and he can trace his lineage all the way back to like freaking Joseph Smith.
The man himself. And maybe not him, but definitely Brigham Young. But yeah, so just super interesting story. You know, he grew up out there in Colorado City with all the sister wives and 40 brothers and sisters and all of this. And he just never felt right about it. Like never felt right about it. And then he had transitioned into, I think, just like a non-believer, and he went and served in the Marines and stuff like this. And then he became a born-again Christian, and he's actually like a pastor now or whatever that's called. Yeah.
And he lives in Colorado City.
Dude, we should have him on
At least the last time I checked on him, and he's out there like he's an apostate, basically.
Living amongst.
Yeah, target on his back, but you know, he has his purpose, but yeah, he's a super interesting guy, but he had come over and had some conversations with us and, you know, basically made his argument as to why he didn't believe in the church. And then that's when basically that idea was, that wasn't an idea anymore, I guess. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, then, and I never felt like that was something that I was interested in or into. And, you know, we did have some missionaries come over, and, you know, one of them finally challenged me to get baptized. And when he challenged me, I just laid it all out right there. I was like, you know, I appreciate you guys, your positive attitudes. And if there is a Holy Spirit or whatever it is, bringing that into my home. But like, I'm just not going to do it. I've just never felt compelled. I've never felt drawn to it. I've grown up around it, lots of friends, and there's a lot of positive aspects that I appreciate about the religion.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people that come from those backgrounds that have been good influences on my life. It's just there's never been not one thing that's ever drawn me to it.
No, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you were younger, like junior high, high school, you had Mormon friends. Did you ever hear them talk about like them going on a scout camp or something like that?
Yeah, they did scouts and stuff, but it was, you know.
Did you ever feel left out? Like, man, that sounds cool.
Great question. Yeah. So I had a buddy when I first moved here and I was 7. He was in the scouts and everything. And I remember I went to like a meeting with him, and it turned out, obviously I wasn't LDS, and not being LDS, there really wasn't a place for me in the scouts. So
that's weird though, because the scouts at that time, it was the Boy Scouts of America, and they were separate. They weren't like the LDS church was a huge donator and propagator of scouting, but they weren't like related.
Yeah.
And so growing up, we had a kid in my neighborhood that was very similar upbringing to you, and he lived like kitty corner from my backyard. And it's like one of the biggest regrets I have growing up is like not being a better friend to him, because I was told by all the other Mormon people around me to stay away from him because his parents like smoke and drank and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, kind of came from a broken home. And it wasn't until we were like 16 years old that we started inviting him and like getting him involved with scouting. And by the time we were like 17, he was actually like our troop leader.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But like, I was like my biggest regret in my childhood. So that's why I asked, because, you know, you grew up on the other side of the coin. It was like, I mean, like, was there ever a time where you were like, man, I wish I could have been a part of that? Or
yeah, I think when I was younger, I would have definitely liked to have been a part of it. But, you know, I'm like a duck in water. Shit just flows right off my back. I don't take anything too serious, you know?
Did you ever have a chip on your shoulder against it? Like, man.
No, not really. I think I did when I was younger. I remember talking about, man. And I think that my interpretation of it was a little bit, I'm not sure if it was good or bad, but I felt like I was kind of ousted because of the fact that I wasn't LDS.
Because of beliefs.
You know, yeah, it was made very clear to me by my buddy, like, hey, man, if you're not like LDS, like,
yeah, I can't have you at my house.
There's really not like a place for you in scouts. So,
I'm sorry about that, man.
It's all good. I forgot all about that till you brought that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That means we're getting to the nitty gritty here.
Well, and I feel like when I was younger, I did feel like it was kind of definitely odd man out, you know, and as I've gotten older and I've thought about things a little bit more and kind of how I was and everything, I just, you know, I let some of that those personal feelings go, because just, you know, I just felt like there's maybe more context to it.
Yeah.
Than, you know, maybe even outside of just the religious aspect. And maybe it's just me assuming best intentions, you know? I try to do that as much as possible.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, you probably weren't like consciously trying to assume best intentions. It just kind of came natural for you, right? That's been a theme in our adult lives together as we've worked together. I think we put that label, like assuming best intentions in everything is super crucial, but
yeah.
You can relight that if you need to. I get Jared talking. So that's the cool thing about cigars. Cigars will go out because it's all natural tobacco. And so if you're having a long conversation, it's important to keep puffing it, but I just keep getting him talking. So, sorry, you have to keep relighting.
It's all good, dog.
But, okay. So, and you'll hear me say this on this podcast a lot. Like, I think the Mormon LDS gospel, or their religion, I think is a beautiful religion, but I think the culture is sickeningly ugly because of that reason. It's very exclusive. It's very judgmental. It's very pompous, really, which is exactly the opposite of Christ and his teachings. If you're familiar.
Well, and there's two types of Mormons. You have Utah Mormons, very immersed within the culture and everything that you just explained. But then there's also Mormons that
the real Mormons.
Well, they're on the other side of the coin. Maybe they grew up outside of Utah. Yeah. And they were the ones who were kind of looked down on.
I think they're the real Mormons today. Yeah. I think there's plenty of great people in Utah. I'm not trying to bash on anybody, but they don't have that. There's a different tangible culture if you've met Mormons out of the state.
They're different people for sure.
Yeah, like I've met people in the Marines like that were from out of state. I did not even know they were Mormon until like 6 months in. They're like, oh yeah, I'm Mormon. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, I'm not practicing all the time, or like I am, but I just assumed they were some other Christian denomination. But here I was being this Utah Mormon, like beating my chest about it and like, yeah, my religion is so true. And and this other little humble Mormon kid's just way more of an influential person in that regard than I was. Yeah. He was a great example.
Well, they don't wear it on their sleeve, you know, because for them to wear that on their sleeve, and, you know, if they do, like, more power to you. But at the same time, like, when you're kind of looked down on as an outsider, you know, you're
reserved about it.
More reserved, maybe more humble about it.
That's a good point.
You know, and it's similar to being a non-Mormon in Utah. You're kind of that outsider.
Right.
You know.
So I know I wanted to touch on this too in your early life as we wrap these cigars up, but you were a pretty physical dude.
Yeah.
You know, junior high and high school, you started, you know, you were basically like a beefcake, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Beefcake.
Bit of a man child.
That's a Cartman from South Park. Beefcake. But yeah, you were a strong dude. Since, you know, we're talking about you being a projector and you're identifying these systems, what was like your system that enabled you to be strong? I mean, obviously genetics at a young age has stuff to do with it.
Yeah.
I remember being 14 and just being able to like, I actually threw my dad on top of a stove. It wasn't on or anything, but I slammed him on top of a counter basically at age 14. Cause you start getting, you know, go through puberty, you start getting that testosterone in you. And then like, but you took it to the next level. I remember you telling me about how much you could bench and stuff like that and how you would hit the weights. What was like your system to that in high school that you started identifying?
You know, to kind of backtrack on that, I've just always enjoyed doing hard things. As a kid, I used to sit there and I would hold my breath.
Like physical things.
Like physical things.
Like if I gave you a Rubik's Cube at age 8, how interested would you have been in it?
Probably not that interested.
Yeah. But if I told you to hold your breath for 5 minutes?
Very interested.
You're like...
Yeah, so I was always like to do hard stuff, like whether it's like, you know, I used to just go walk long distances or just go run long distances when I was 13, and part of it was just because I was a little on the chunky side there for a second, but I used to cut the bottom of like a grocery bag, put it on as like a kind of sweatsuit thing, put on some sweaters and then go running. And I just enjoyed the shit out of it. But even just as a little kid, what I would do is hold my breath and then perform tasks, because something told me just, you know, and thankfully I haven't experienced it. I hope to never experience it. But if I'm ever in this situation where a car goes off a bridge or I got to save someone's life or whatever it is, like I'm used to doing stuff while holding my breath. Like, yeah, I've always been drawn to doing hard things and pushing myself.
Weren't you saying like get a little more specific? Because you've told me some funny stories about this where you were like across the house and you would like, I'm going to see if I can hold my breath by the time I do something. Or whatever.
Yeah. So
if I need to do this in a fire or something, I know I can.
Yeah, it would just be, I don't know, it's hard to come up with the specific example on the spot, but it would just be just normal stuff like, you know, if I had to wash the dishes, I'd be like, okay, I got to wash this amount of dishes, and hold my breath and like be like, you know, and even like I would hold my breath, say if like we're getting in the car to go into the house and I'm going to unlock the door. Like I would hold my breath to do that, and like preferably in the dark. So to be able to hold your breath and not be able to see and get a key in a hole and open a door, like just weird random things like that. I've always been drawn to doing stuff like that. Or like I would even hold my breath in school, like in elementary school in 6th grade. I remember in 6th grade, I was super proud of myself, but I held my breath for 2 minutes while like trying to do an assignment. And
you woke up in the nurse's office.
Yeah, but later in life, you know, I was an adult, full-fledged adult, but, you know, doing like some Wim Hof sort of breathing and then holding my breath, and I did like 4 minutes doing that. But, you know, you get yourself fully oxygenated, and dude, it was the craziest thing. Like after I did that, I just felt like my whole body was like buzzing, and like I started crying, dude, just because I felt so fucking good.
So you're doing breath work, basically.
Breath work.
And then intentionally holding your breath.
Yeah.
So there's like so much studies on that. You've probably seen the Joe Rogan podcast about that. You can like literally unlock DMT that's already in your body.
Swear to God, dude. I felt like my
buzzing.
Body was like just every cell in my body was just positively vibrating.
Dude. And how old were you when you did that?
Oh, I was in my, you know, that's when probably Joe Rogan introduced Wim Hof to the world.
Oh, so this was more in your adult life.
Yeah, more in my adult life. But
because you had that, like... You did those little challenges as a kid.
And you know, and then so I just kind of took that certain like ethic to do hard stuff into like working out basically. So, or like even in a sauna, like I have this thing in a sauna. If you've come in within at least 10 minutes of me, I'm gonna fucking stay in there until you're gone. I don't care if I got to be in there for an hour.
You're just like silently competing.
Yeah,
with yourself.
Yeah, with myself, or with other people. But but it transitioned well into
Unbeknownst to them.
yeah, it transitioned well into like physical activity because, you know, I learned that I really like to run. Even though I was a little heavy set kind of kid, I really like to run. And, you know, and even like certain guys, they bloom up faster than others. So it was like seventh grade. There was like, I think I was like the second strongest kid in the school, and the kid that was stronger than, or not in the school, but in my grade. And the kid that was stronger than me was like a full head taller than me and like deep voice. And I'm still kind of this little kid that hasn't, you know, hit my growth spurt yet.
Yeah.
So I've always had just kind of this natural strength to me. And once I started running around that time, I just loved it. And I loved to push myself and, you know, and also like to finish strong. Like nobody had to tell me finish strong. It was something innate in me. So it's like if I'm running around the track 8 times.
Yeah.
Those last 2 like laps, like I'm fucking all out sprinting.
Yeah.
Like just to finish strong, because the natural inclination is when you're getting to the end of something is to start like there it is.
Step off the gas.
Let me like step off the gas. I'm like, no, motherfucker, I am fucking putting every foot on the gas. I'm going to push myself as hard as I can, full out sprint for 2 freaking laps. But that stuff, it just like, that's my shit. I don't know if whatever it is, I've always just enjoyed doing hard stuff. And then when it got to like, so I started taking weight training, and I'd take it, you know, once a semester, I think from 9th grade on. And, you know, it was always like usually top 2 strongest or whatever my grade. And then by the time 11th grade came around and I took weight training again, it was just my body was ready for it. Like all my genes and everything had activated. And then I put on like 20 pounds of muscle in like a month. So all of a sudden I'm just like kind of normal looking. And I was still super strong, like without even working out for, you know, since the previous school year. I was like 150 pounds and I was like repping 225 when I was 16. But then I took weight training my junior year. Then, yeah, I just all of a sudden got all stacked up.
Just beefed out,
super strong. And then that's when a lot of guys started asking me to get back into football. And that's when I decided to get back into football. But it was like, you know, the summer before football, I was living with my dad over in the middle of town. Before my senior year, I was living with my dad over in the middle of town. It's about 5 miles from Snow Canyon High School where I went.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad would drop me off at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, whatever time it was. And I would do all the football, like workouts, conditioning and all of that. Then I'd run my ass home. And
Nice.
it would
From practice.
And it wouldn't be like, you know, a casual run. Like I was pushing myself, and especially that last stretch of road. I mean, it was all out sprint. You just see this freaking kid at 9 a.m. just sprinting down freaking Tabernacle.
That's Spartan like.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
And then I remember my football coach was like, "Do you really run all the way across town every day after this?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why don't you ask someone for a ride?" I was like, 2 reasons. 1, I like to do it, and 2, I don't want to rely on anybody.
Yeah.
Because that's how I grew up. Like, if I wanted something, it was me that provided it. I couldn't necessarily rely on anyone else. So, you know, and that's been something that served me well in life, but also, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but it's also been a problem in life because it's like, you know, there's certain times where you need help and you need to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I just want to ask for it.
But you didn't know how, probably.
I didn't know how because I didn't expect it, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I remember like my, cause I would do all the training and stuff. And then, like we'd be in the gym and my coach would be in there and I would do planks.
Yeah.
And I would do these things for like, I don't even know, a long fucking time. I'd sit there after full workout, sit there and just do planks. And it wouldn't be like with your elbows on the ground, full out in push-up position. Sit there forever. And I remember my football coach just like, holy shit, is he still going? Holy shit, is he still going?
Did you ever get approached by military recruiters?
No.
I don't think they were too big down here.
No, they weren't. But yeah, so it was just, I was always drawn to doing really hard things. And I always enjoyed it. Loved running long distances. And I mean, it was a couple years before I moved back from Las Vegas. My work truck broke down, and I was like about 11 miles to where I lived, and I could have made a phone call.
You're like, I'll just run it.
Fucking ran it. I hadn't ran in probably a couple years.
And your work boots too, probably some.
No,
jeans.
well, it was freaking dress shoes because I was selling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I freaking had dress shoes and I ran my ass home, and just because I like to do it, or even like, dude, I used to in high school I worked at a restaurant over off of South Bluff, and it didn't matter. Like I would go out and party or whatever, be up 4 a.m. partying, and then I had to work at 8, and I'd get up at 7. I would, or just depending on the time, I would run home. Maybe it was like 4 miles home, get my work stuff on, and then run to work. And then I would run home from work. And people would pull over sometimes, like I knew. They'd be like, "You want to ride?"
Like, nah.
I'm like, "No, I got it." And then everybody would always be like, "Bro, I saw you running. I saw you running."
I saw you running in dress shoes.
It was like I was Forrest Gump, dude. I was running.
Hey, you sort of run.
But, I think it was a combination of not wanting to rely on anybody for anything, and just like the hard nature of just like, it didn't matter if I was partying all night.
Do you think people found you arrogant because of that?
I don't know if they found me arrogant. Probably for other reasons.
Well, probably because you had this you mentioned it earlier when you were a kid. You're like, I could find a way to do anything I wanted. And then in high school, if people thought you were arrogant, I would wager that it's because you had a deep confidence.
Yeah.
At that level. Maybe not like academically confident, maybe not in other ways, but you're like, bitch, I can hold my breath while I do the dishes.
Yeah.
Quiet. Like, yeah, bitch, I stayed in the sauna 10 minutes after you left. You know, like I did those little victories. You were like giving yourself little victories.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so you were basically telling yourself who you were.
Yep.
Who you were. And if it came natural to you, that's awesome. I can say this. I had a very similar mindset when I was younger, but the moment somebody would tell me to do something, I instantly didn't want to do it. And we'll get into that whenever we do mine.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. I started grinning when you were talking about like holding your breath and shit. Just like little stupid boy stuff.
Yeah.
That like only dudes know that I Yeah, for me it was like, I'm going to hit that. No one's watching. I'm like, I'm going to hit that lamppost with a rock. Ping, first shot. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't need to tell anybody about that, but I know I can do that.
Yeah, I've done shit like that.
And then when someone's watching and then you do it and they're like, holy shit, dude, Jared just hit that. Yeah. But you're like, I already did that 5 times.
Yeah.
When no one was watching.
But yeah, I don't know what we all of us have different makeups, and some of us are, more inclined to other things than others. But for whatever reason, I've always been really drawn to physically hard stuff.
Physical shit.
And it was definitely rough. I'm still trying to reconfigure my life right now, because I spent so much time, years being like very sick, Yeah. I had to get blood transfusions every 6 months just not to die. Like I was basically dying all the time.
And this is where your story in that regard, that if it takes 2 episodes, like that I'm gonna pick the shit out of that.
That's
it's an awesome story.
Yeah, that is a whole other thing, And I was lucky enough to, get to the age of 28 before I had any sort of health problems like that, because I've met people like they have like a 10-year-old kid that has that disease.
Same as you had.
And I couldn't imagine like being that young and being like dealing with that, because all the lessons I learned from working my ass off from, and then even like when I tied rebar in Las Vegas, that was a whole nother thing. And that was like the perfect situation for me, because these guys were drawn to hard shit just to see if we could do it. Yeah. We worked in Las Vegas in 118 degrees dealing with hot ass rebar. I mean, this shit is hot.
This is like the perfect segue into that, because I know your story.
And we didn't wear gloves.
Yeah.
For the first 2 years I did that, it was
We're
just
gonna have to find some images of rebar. So when we're telling the story on the next one,
of how hot. Like
I want to show images of what you did, what like a load of rebar looks like on someone's shoulder.
Yeah.
Because it's not. Yeah, it's some hard shit, dude.
Yeah, and we would have competitions to see who could lift the most, and and like something that maybe is a little bit too much weight for people, we would double that.
So that your little desire to like internally compete with yourself and do these little challenges, was like fully manifested in that job.
Yeah.
So we'll dive into that one. That's going to be a good
Yeah.
one, dude. But real quick, let's do a cigar check. How are you liking the let's see what we had here. I can't remember the name. The Fonseca. How you liking this one?
I like it, man. It's smooth.
It is smooth, right?
I keep talking a lot and it keeps going out, but
Yeah.
you know, what's a podcast if you're not talking?
Yeah, what's cool about cigars, you can actually set these down and it will burn out. You could come back to it, 20, 30 minutes later. As long as it's not dried out, you kind of want to test it, squeeze it, make sure it's still humid. Mm-hmm. If you squeeze it and it's cracking, just chuck that.
Yeah,
That's done.
It's going to be stale.
Yeah, and then, if you basically what you do is you purge the cigar if you want to set it down. So you instead of just setting it down, you're like, cool, that's half of it. But you blow outward. Blow out the smoke from the internals, and then you can set it down and let it rest. And then when you want to do a real relight, like you're just reheating yours basically, but you scrape out all the ash and everything that way. But yeah, these Fonsecas are pretty good by my father. This is my first Fonseca I've smoked, actually. I saved them
really?
for this episode. Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're smooth.
But now, how are we doing on time so far? 120. Dude, let's we'll pin it there. We can just keep rolling while we smoke, but I think that's a wrap on episode 2. Episode 2. Anything else? Do you feel like we covered your early childhood decently enough?
Yeah.
Talking about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
there's a little bit more to it. There's definitely a lot of violence involved, stuff that I've seen, and I also used to fight a lot. And
yeah, maybe we could talk about that in your adult life too, because we'll talk about, you did get in some fights as an adult.
Yeah.
And then we'll bounce back to your early years and fill in some gaps, but I feel like that's a good foundation for you. Now, you being a projector, based off what I was reading, how does that resonate for you?
I mean, it makes sense,
Yeah.
Especially like what I feel like what I'm like that's my jam is to like get a problem and like break it down and
Find a system,
find solutions,
guidance,
and and
see
also
what others cannot.
And also be able to, something I've had to learn over time is how to get people bought into stuff.
Dude, actually, let me read you this thing on that thing. On that exact note, getting people bought into your guidance or coaching. The main challenge for projectors is not being recognized or valued for their unique gifts and insights. This can lead to feelings of frustration, bitterness, and not being seen or appreciated. So in your earlier years, did you ever have a moment where you felt like that? Like, I'm not being appreciated here. Or I feel like I'm offering something that's just no one's taking.
I don't think so.
That's probably more for your adult life.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can think of like 5.
I can think of a lot in my adult life.
Okay.
Well,
I'll come back to this. If you don't mind, I'll just keep this up every time when I'm interviewing you, dude, and we'll bounce back. Because really, this human design thing, when I read mine, I was in tears. And I grew up Mormon, and I had a patriarchal blessing, and that's supposed to be like your roadmap for your life and shit. But it was nothing compared to this. This was right on the money. And so I think a lot of it comes to fruition in your adult life. So we'll save the rest of that for now.
Absolutely.
On the way out, though, let me teach you what's called a retrohale with these cigars. So if you want to really enjoy the flavor of a cigar, I usually try and do it once per smoke. Some people do it all the time. Some people do it never. But a retrohale is you get a puff in your mouth and then force it through your nose, and it like coats your nasal cavity and everything with the scent of the cigar, the smell of it. It burns a little bit. Yep.
That's that shit right there.
But now if you do that once, like clear it out for a little bit. And then
I feel that in my brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I don't know if you've had many nicotine buzzes in your life, but do you get a bigger buzz off the cigar? Or not any?
Not a whole lot.
Like I can tell if I have like kind of an empty stomach and I stand up too quick, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
My head swims for just like a split second.
Yeah, I would say probably like when I used to smoke cigarettes when I was an early teen. And something I used to do as well when I was a kid, like 10 years old. I used to steal packs of cigarettes from Lynn's. because they just kept them right there.
Yeah, this is before they changed all the laws on it.
Yeah, and then it was the one time because I used to go there, I'd scope it out. Okay, coast is clear. Snatch a pack. Go put on my rollerblades. Roll out. And the one time the coast was clear, and I just got this feeling it wasn't. Now's not the time, bro. So I went and put on my rollerblades. The store manager comes over, asked me to empty my pockets. Nothing there. I was like, all right, deuces. Put on my rollerblades, skated on out of there.
You just had this feeling, like intuitive.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something I'm. The more I'm my authentic self, the better my intuition is.
Yeah, because you're not like trying to be something you're not.
Yep. And it's almost like I get a connection with people to where it's almost like we can connect or like communicate telepathically. It's the weirdest fucking thing. I've done it with my mom. I've done it with my daughter. I was doing it with my wife last night because I've been really trying to focus on like letting work go and just being myself and being silly or whatever it is.
Sure.
And then it's like, it's crazy the connections that you have with people and
when you're being truly you.
When you're being truly you.
Yeah, I think being truly you is like there's literally you're not wearing a mask. There's no walls or defenses built up around anything. And you can you're in like a flow state of yourself.
Yep. There's nothing filtering that signal. That signal is alive and strong and just.
So in that situation where you stole some cigarettes, or you normally would have, what changed? Like, do you remember any cue or anything? Like
nothing. It was a feeling. So
you bought something from Lynn's? Because anybody that's truly, had a klepto phase or knows how to boost something, right? You got to buy something.
Yeah, no, I didn't even buy nothing with it.
You just went in and you're like,
I just
not
went
today.
in. Yeah, today's not the day, and that was the day that I would have gotten some serious trouble.
So the manager, like, how often would you rollerblade to Lynn's then?
Oh, we'd go there every day.
Yeah.
My cousin and I, we used to have these.
And other kids were there too, right? Like it was kind of a spot for Dixie Down kids to be like.
Yeah, and they gave away free cookies. So my cousin and I, we would go to Lynn's, and he'd go over and say, "Hey, can I get a cookie for me and my cousin?"
They're just asking to be stolen from.
And then he'd come back, give me my cookie, and I'd go, "Hey, can I get a cookie for me and my cousin?" So any way that we could game the system.
Yeah. I got an aunt who needs one.
Yeah. Get free cookies. So yeah, we would go to Lynn's all the time. Get a quarter, go get a Doc Shasta.
Yeah.
From the machine. Because
I'm pretty sure that's where Jeff Fieldstead and Jefferson would end up sometimes too, right? Because they lived close by.
Yeah, Jeff for sure. In fact, my first memory of Jeff was Jeff Fieldstead was in Lynn's parking lot over on the side.
Yeah, he said he was bullying somebody.
Yeah, he was kind of giving this guy a hard time.
I was telling him that story. I'm like, yeah, we were talking about you. And I was like, yeah, his first memory of you is like bullying some kid in Lynn's parking lot. He's like, really? He's like, I don't recall. He's like, yeah, I was kind of a jerk.
Yeah, I was kind of a jerk too.
Yeah, I was too in different ways. I was a closet jerk. Like
jerking in the closet?
Jerking in the closet is a great place too, because, when it's dark, sensories, you lose some of your senses, the other ones can't. So yeah, that's a great place if you're looking for a spot. Go to the closet. No, but we'll get into this too. But in my earlier years, like I was really like devious, but I knew how to get away with shit. Like I would do stuff. So on the outside looking in, it was like, oh, Blake's this little Mormon kid. I remember running in from recess, and I'll elaborate this, but I remember just being like, I could trip this kid. And he was older than me. I was like probably 4th or 5th grade. And he was this redheaded 6th grader who was just like a tyrant on the playground. Mm-hmm. We were running in down this little hill, and I'm like, I could trip him. And I was like, no, don't do it yet. Wait till he's going to fall on the pavement.
Oh, shit.
And so I was like, yeah, I don't know what it was. Like if I had a reason to go, like if that guy was a jerk to me, like I would find these weird ways to just make him suffer. So there's like this gaggle of kids, and I'm just running right next to him. And you know how you can, while they're running, their foot's up behind them, you can kick their ankle over and it like catches their other foot. All I did was I just ran and I just went, just tapped his ankle.
Little tap.
And the dude just went flying. I remember he was completely vertical next to me, and I was just, didn't even look at him. So in my periphery, I could just see him Supermaning, and then he just hit the gravel, because there was like gravel from the playground on the asphalt. So I was like, it was a pretty, not like a steep hill, but it was like, we got some momentum after you run down that. And I just was like, yeah, I'm going to trip this guy. And I was like, whoa, hold on. I'm going to wait till he hits the pavement. So like, bonk. And then he just went like face first into the asphalt and just scraped up his whole face on the gravel. And I just ran in and got in line with my class, and we went into, math or history or whatever. And I didn't even think twice about it because that kid had just been torturing us all year on the playground, So the little stuff like that, that's what I was all about.
Yeah. Before we get out, I had a funny story. Was it 4th grade? My teacher used to give us Tootsie Rolls if we got like answers right and stuff.
Yeah.
So I got my 2 friends and I was like, okay, guys, this is the plan. We're right before recess. We're going to hide in the cabinets, and they're going to go out to recess, and then we're going to raid that freaking Tootsie Roll jar.
It's like Ocean's 11.
Yeah, bro. And so we did it. And then I remember we were walking because it's like a big, huge like field over there. And we're walking on the outskirts of the field and just eating them and like just throwing the Tootsie Roll wrappers on the ground.
Yeah, discarding the evidence.
And then like the next day, like she had like this, she was pretty upset about it. Like looked like she was about to cry, but she was like, someone stole the Tootsie Rolls, and I just don't think we can have them anymore, and this and that. And we're over there like,
oh, dude, you're laughing. Like at the time, you thought you were like Slick Rick, right?
Yeah,
like,
dude.
Yeah. But now looking back at it, you're like that poor teacher on a teacher's salary could barely afford Tootsie Rolls for your ass.
Yeah,
isn't that funny though? Like, yeah, you're like,
but and those same kids, because I've always had like a little entrepreneur in me, so I learned how to make hemp necklaces. My mom always had like beads and stuff. And I taught them how to make hemp necklaces, and
puka shell.
No, not puka shell. This was before puka shells, hemp necklaces, and we would be selling them at school and shit. Yeah, just different ways to make money.
Nice, dude. Just hustling, man.
Hustling.
And then, if it's okay with you, next time I want to get into your other illicit activities that you did as a kid.
Yeah,
teen, because I know you were quite the entrepreneur in other ways as well.
I was. By the time I was 14, I stopped doing chores because I paid my friends to do my chores.
Yeah. It goes back to that projector shit, dude. You just give people guidance.
Yep.
And, you're like, okay, here's the plan. Here's the system.
Yep.
Now you got the right people in place. And it's cool to see you do that, man. I've seen you do that in the professional world.